As soon as the webinar is done, I'll convert that into a recorded video and put it on the YouTube channel. Okay, and so we're starting with topic 2. We'll go through topic 2 and have a break, and then we're going to do topic 3. And there's a lot of information. I'm sorry that there's a lot, and that's why I'm telling you that I'm trying to give you hints as to what's important and how you should do that study. So that's why these little graphs that I provide in terms of, what you need to look at in the commentary presentations, in terms of, what's been highlighted in yellow, the golden keys, what's been actually bolded as well, along with what's been highlighted, and that will really point you into the right direction. There's not all the information that's required to be able to work through the test on the commentary, and that's why I asked you to go through the actual e-text PowerPoint presentations, which are very important because they're really rich in material, and then go to the other areas inside of Blackboard in terms of the Blackboard slide deck that's there. But I'm hopefully that's going to reduce the amount of time and allow you to focus on what you need to do. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover off topics 2 and topic 3, and they're primary associated with assignment number 2. And assignment number 2, what I'm going to do is I'm going to prepare a video tomorrow and release that to give you some clues as to how to answer those questions and what's important in terms to get the proper marks to be able to be successful in that particular assignment. There's one little thing is that because of the protracted term in spring term, there's question number 7 in assignment 2 is related to chapter 5, or sorry, topic 5. But I've given you information in the documentation that's supplied along with the assignment to be able to complete that. And if you need additional information, you're going to see, I'm going to show you the presentation at the end of topic 3 that relates to organizational structure. That's part of the eText Robbins PowerPoint presentation, and that should give you everything that you need to be able to complete assignment number 2. And that assignment number 2 is due on May 13th, so it's next week. It's going to be pretty close, and it's an individual submission, by the way. Okay. So before we get started, if anybody wants to unmute and ask a question, I'd be happy to answer that. And along with that comment, I'd like to tell you that at any time, send me an email if you have a question. And if the question answer is related to your colleagues, I will post that answer on the Blackboard announcements, and I'll thank you very much for providing the information as well. Okay, so any questions at all? How we doing? Okay. Okay, just want to make sure that we're okay. We're okay on the piece. We started the recording. Okay, so we'll get started. Okay, and let's go with it. So topic 2 is probably is probably one of the most important areas that is going to help you, and it's how we make decisions. And I know myself, I know when I was going through college and whatever, I really didn't think too much about how I made decisions. And the whole idea is that the better choices that you make, the better outcomes that you succeed in. And that's so key. And really what I'm telling you is that pick a framework. There's many decision-making frameworks in the internet that you can access. But find one that works for you and use it and really internalize it so that you can make decisions second nature and going through the process where you won't have as many cognitive biases or any other types of biases, and you'll have more information to be able to make those decisions. And if any of you are taking microeconomics these days, or you're going to take microeconomics, there's this term called opportunity cost. And so you always evaluate, what you're going to do, and it has to be better than the next best alternative. And you need to really understand, what you're going to give up to get. And that's really how you make the better decisions, the better choices. And oh, by the way, the organizations and the people who ask the better questions get the better outcomes, right? Because they make better choices, because they get good answers, right? So we're going to talk about the factors that affect decision making, how decision making is organized within the institution, and then how you, as a decision maker, you have a predominant style. And I'm hoping that Rebel surveys will really identify that for you. You'll have this predominant management style of making decisions. This is all part of assignment number 2, where you're going to have to kind of reflect on that and understand that. And then understand, as we get into the later topics, we're going to talk about contingency theory and situation analysis or situation analysis management, where you have to shift from your predominant style in some cases to have a style that fits the situation. And that's no different when having a decision-making style. And I'll comment on that as we go through some of the slides that we're going to carry today. Okay, to go through. All right. So here we are. We'll get going. And what I want to allude you to, there's 3 main presentations that I'd like you to review and keep reviewing, especially as we go through the tests 1, 2, and 3, because especially this one, the Supplement 1A. I've included all the information I've added to Robbins' presentation on this one, and that's why it's in my Google Docs that you link to, and because the particular one that you would just pull off the platform, the Pearson platform, doesn't have the additional information that I've provided inside of it. So really what it does, it covers basically the whole course in terms of all the theorists that we cover and all the theories that they contribute to. So it's a really good summational document to use. And I'm hoping that you're going to use this summational document as well to be able to do well on your assignment number 2. Okay, so this is the link right here. And really, this is the title, but it's really Supplement 1A that you're going through. And really what it kind of, just a quick summary is that, these are the main areas or categories of management principles. There's the classical school, behavioral school, the quantitative approach, and the contemporary approach. And basically that is, that's the continuum, that's the evolution. It started in the classical school, with Frederick Taylor in terms of scientific management, and then moved on as the requirements changed, as the situations changed, as the environment changed, as the the world of economics changed. People needed to have better techniques to be able to engage the worker and be productive and provide meaningful work. So those are the 4 pieces. And when I ask you certain questions, I want you to dip down from the category down into the actual theory and the principles as well. Okay. So here's the kind of the timeline. And it starts right, way back in 1890 and through the Industrial Revolution. And you can see that as things progressed, there were different requirements for different types of management principles. And as a result, the management principles turn into different tools. And you can see this top one, this is where you're going to play in terms of when you leave this program and you have to, work with the kind of what they call disruptive technologies that are going to result from artificial intelligence. And you're going to have to deal with that. And that's going to create a whole new set of challenges on how do you manage people, and several challenges around trust and around ethics. And you can see that, and I'll explain this quickly, I guess, but in terms of trust, you're seeing a lot of distrust in institutions today. And so that when you have a particular AI organization that comes out and shows an innovation, people will be reticent to try it because they're not quite sure, what that's going to do to them. They don't trust it, and so trust becomes a really big part of your positioning and your basis of operations. so that people have the confidence in the products and services that you're providing and will trust your organization or trust you as a business practitioner, that you're doing the right things for them for the right reasons. So that's key. So these are all the theories that are going to come through. I'm not covering them today, but you can see that as we get into the later years, quantitative theory and technology-driven workplace and systems theory and the learning organization is really kind of the latter part of the additional management principles that have to be used. And it's not to say that, with Frederick Taylor and scientific management, some of those principles are still being used. It's not as if that they're irrelevant. They're still relevant in certain applications. So that's where where you have to understand what's going on. But I wanted to kind of give you an idea of why you need to understand the history and going forward. And basically this example, and it's not going to be in the test or anything, but it's from my background in telecommunications. And this is just telephone technology, just seeing how it evolved, from way back when in 1876, when Alexander Graham Bell invents that telephone. You can see that that was the first innovation, and then how other innovations layered on top of that, just like you have other management principles that are layered on top of what's going on because things have changed. Technology has changed. You're getting into disruptive technologies, and how do you deal with that? So you could see that, we went from, the first automatic dial system to, operators with a patch cord. They were manual switchboards where they were connecting calls, all right? And then from the 40s and 50s, they took that information on how that was structured and said, how do we improve that? And they improved that in terms of electromechanical. So now you had, actuators that did the connecting, all right? And then they used that information and that knowledge and then built on that and then went to what we call early digital switching systems, where they started replacing, the old mechanical, or what we call analog, and really got into, the computer side of making things happen. And then from the 80s and the 90s, all of a sudden fiber optics became part of the technology with the conversion with computers, and it just revolutionized everything. And we're actually, in today's world now, we actually have optical switches, and we have this IP-based technology, so voice over IP and mobile networks. And what you'll find is, even, if you take a look at optical switches, there's some terminology that they use that basically emulates and supersedes an old technology, and they're using the same descriptors, so that you could see that, as technology changes, as society changes, we take the information that we've learned from. And that's the basis to be able to innovate, because now we take a look at the challenge versus, where are we now and where do we want to be, and then combine the knowledge that we have and build on it. And really, that's what we're doing in this evolution of management principles. So I wanted to bring that to your to your attention, and you can see that in the earlier years, it was all about execution. And then as execution started to compromise, the fitting in of the employees, then they started going to expertise and working on. And then from there, we're into the whole new age of empathy and trust. And that's what's key in doing what we need to do. And if you take a look at, empathy is like, it's a different employee contract. Now what we're doing is we're taking a look at, from a triple bottom line, how are we impacting society? How are we engaging the worker so that the worker is feeling that they are doing meaningful work and feel part of the shared vision? And you can see that the workforce has changed, because we're all a bunch of contractors now. Employee from one organization for life is a thing of the past, and so that the management principles have to change. It's that new contract. So when you start with an organization, you agree to provide services. You'd agree to develop in your position to be able to do the best that you can. And as part of that contract, the organization will provide you some training, will provide you some work and pay you for it. But at the end of, say, a project, then you may be terminated. You may be, I say that in a good way. I mean, the project is done, and then the company will look at other employees to do other projects. All right. So that's where that is. I talked about trust, but the thing is, trust between people, institutions, the technology that we depend on. It's the glue that holds it all together. That's the North Star. And you need to understand that. And you just have to take a look at what's going on in the world today, where people are not trusting banks. They're not trusting government services. And we need to reestablish that trust and have the customer, the client, confident in what they're dealing with, and that confident that you're going to take care of them. Okay, so that's where that piece. So how does this all come together? So what we're looking at then is we're looking at trends and business solution challenges and disruptive technology from AI technology development, and then we take a look at new management theories that are created from that to be able to deal with that. But along the way, now you as a person, you're looking at, do I have the right training? Do I have the right skills? Do I have the right capabilities to be able to deal with the new management theories that result in management principles and then that result in the creation of tools? So how do you prepare for that? So these two pieces that we're doing in the course in terms of the Rebel surveys and understanding, what's going on, and you're going to see, in assignment number 3, we're really looking at a career development plan for managers. So you'll get a sense of what you need, in the future, and that will allow you to be, part of the solution in terms of looking at new and existing management applications, at new management techniques and tools, and creating, looking at the relevance, in the performance assessments. Are these things working? And if they aren't, well, then let's go back and change what we need to do, or recalibrate, or do what we need to do. So essentially, this course really kind of gives you a sense of meeting that management challenge to be relevant. And again, there's one article I think I passed on to you, but I will if I haven't yet. It's AI may not replace you, but someone using AI may replace you. So, you've got to be in that top 20% of elite performers. And if you're in that top 20% of elite performers, then you'll always have work. And, it may be contract work, but you will always have work because you'll have value to bring to organizations and your own company if you decide that you want to run your own company. Okay, so this is how we're learning. We look at the management theory, and we look at the background of the theorists and how they contribute and the pros and cons. And then from that management theory, management principle get developed, they get derived, and they provide management the direction and sort of the bookends on how to move the performance and the fulfillment of an organization towards its vision. And in that process, then from those principles, management tools are created. And that's why we're looking at all these different types of tools in the participation activities, all these different types of frameworks, in terms of tools to how to get things done better, faster, more effectively, and keeping in mind triple bottom line. So that's how we're going. We're going from management theory to management principles to management tools, and that's an ongoing process. When we get into this next phase of management requirements with all the technological disruption that's going to go on with AI machine learning, AI working independently from us, and also all the robotics implications around that as well. Okay, so let's take a look at topic 2. And one of the things that one of the presentations that come out of Pearson is chapter 3, decision making. And so you can access that in the commentary presentation, topic 2. It's there for you. Go through that. that will be a really good piece of information, for your tests as well. Helpful hits, hopefully, I've been subscribing to Gary Gennard here for I bet you 20 years, and you can get on his free newsletter, and by the time you spend about maybe a year or two reading his newsletters, you don't need to purchase his books, and you learn a lot about public speaking and why, because in our day and age and going forward, it's all about communication, communication, communication. Real estate's all about location, location, location. So the better that you could communicate effectively in voice and in written, the more effective you're going to be, and the better off that you're going to be launched into this top 20% of elite performers in terms of being a business practitioner. Okay, so what are the deliverables for topic 2? Well, I talked about reading this this PowerPoint presentation, because you're going to look at the decision-making process. You're going to look at the factors that affect how decisions are made. You're going to look at contemporary issues and managerial decision-making, and you're going to look at how ethics and social responsibility relate to the decision-making. And then, again, we're going to talk about corporate social responsibility in future topics as well, which is a key part of a corporate makeup in terms of positioning the organization as, in that triple bottom line portion of looking at social aspects and things like that in the environment. And so that it all sort of comes together there. Okay. Okay, so here's what you need to do, and I say week 2 deliverables, but for topic 2 deliverables, and you can see that the True Colors piece, it's not on Pearson Revel. It's basically, you actually download a survey, and then you fill it out, and you get the score. And then I'll give you some more information on that piece to be able to submit it in one of the participation activities. So here we have 2 participation activities, and they're both individual exercises. So there's no group requirement until topic 3. And what it is, it's that I'm asking you to name one type of cognitive bias that we listed, and you're going to see that in the slides, and I've actually highlighted in the slides as well where that is, and to kind of latch onto it to understand what it's all about. But the whole idea, though, is I want you to make one choice, one typical cognitive bias, and make sure that you use the definition for it, okay, that's provided for each bias or for any bias that you select, and then actually tell me why it matters. Like, why did you make that decision? Why is that one important to you? And again, I'm not looking for 5 paragraphs. I'm just looking for some economical ways of saying what cognitive bias you've chosen, what it is, and then why you selected it. And that should be maybe 3-4 lines, and that's the scope of the actual requirement that you have to submit to. Okay, the next one is that you're going to complete these Revel surveys, the core 5 personality dimensions. Okay, this one here. And what I'm asking you then is identify your personality dimension that could relate to 2 management theories. And again, if you go back to that 1A a presentation that I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, you'll be able to see where all these theories and theorists lie, and then you can actually relate to that. And oh, by the way, there's I've given you 3 pieces or 3 different presentations, and then one of those presentations on that link, and let's see where it is here. Okay, I don't have it handy now, but really this one document that I created, it connects the actual survey to a theorist and a theory. So you'll be able to make that connection on that participation activity. Okay. All right. So, and I'm looking for you to do 2 management theories on that piece. So that's what that's all about. So that's the deliverables. So any questions at all? Anybody have any questions? You can chat or you can just unmute and ask me. We're all good? I see some thumbs up. We'll go, move ahead. Okay, great. Thanks, Nicole. Okay. Oh, thank you, everybody. That's good. Okay. All right. So here's this true colors piece. And what I'd like you to do is to answer each question, and then you add up, all the A's, and then you add up all the B's, and you add up all the C's and all the D's, and this total, the total of the four equal 80, and then that score will give you a sense of where you are, in that true colors personality assessment. And I want you just to upload your color results with the highest score. You don't have to show me this piece. Just give me the results, and then that's the requirement for that, and you'll get a sense of where you are in terms of that. And we're going to talk about that as I get down into the next pieces of slides. Okay. So I sent you, or at least on announcements, a video about Tuckman's stages of development, and basically he started off with the 4 stages: forming, storming, norming, and performing, and that's really what we're sticking with. But other experts have added on to that, and I'll show you one of them is journeying. But these are the key 4 ones. But what I'd like you to understand here is that as you come together with your group, you have the opportunity to really get a sense of, hey, we're forming, and oh, hang on, we're not agreeing on stuff. Well, yeah, that means we're storming, and knowing that you need to be able to storm, and I'll tell you why. So I did a lot of facilitation in my day, and what I found was when you're trying to get some consensus out of a group, if you don't explore the underlying issues, they will surface at the wrong time later on, and you wouldn't have, you'll have some disconnect in the alignment of the people. So the whole idea that storming is really important to get it all out on the table and deal with it, right? Before then, you can get to norming and coming up with some principles on how you're going to operate. That's what norming is all about. There's norms that you're creating for performance. And then once you start realizing that those norms are working for the group, and people get a sense of, hey, we're getting to be a well-oiled machine here, then you can really start performing. All right. And so that's what that piece is all about. So what you need to do is, here's another piece, and I'm not going to go into it, but it's a link to, working in a virtual group. And why am I saying that is because I know I'm, even in my own experience, a lot is set, especially since COVID or the pandemic, that a lot of the work that I've done, say in consulting, was remote. And a lot of the work was done through, virtual groups, and that's where we're heading. There's going to be more and more work with virtual groups, and the better that you can understand how this works, the more effective you're going to be as a business leader. So that's a link to help you. Are there any test questions related to that? No, but it's there to help you. Here's a piece where this guy talks about you just can't switch to teamwork. You really need to go through this lower part of dealing with the issues before you can start going through, and it's a good idea to go have a look at what this person has to say. And along with that is that I keep on reiterating that strong performing goals have very clear, distinct goals that are set, so there's no question what it is. And this person goes through on how to really set goals for your team. And you may want to have a look at this as you're completing your team charter, for today as well. Okay, so here's the phases of development, forming, and normally what happens, like in my own experience, there'd be a new team that formed, you show up in a meeting place, and the first thing that you're doing is you're scoping, the people that are coming in the room, and you're sizing them up. Well, who's going to be a leader? Who's going to be, an arguer? Who's, all those kind of things. And the thing is, you're all polite at this point in time, but already people will start to show their tendencies, and they'll try to stake their position in the group. And then what happens then at the next stage of the storming? Well, there's some resistance, there's some lack of participation, and the whole idea is that you want to make sure that you know what those issues are and get them out on the table. And then when you get to norming, the purpose of the goals are well understood. You recognize the individuals for their efforts, and then you're really into performing. This piece here, adjourning, this is another add-on that some experts have defined, and some people call it mourning. You can see that they actually use transitioning or mourning phase, and really it's all about the disband. So a lot of the projects that I've been in, when they were completed, we would do what we called a post-mortem analysis. Well, what went right? What went wrong? Well, what did we learn from there? What can we recommend, for the organization as it takes on, the results of our team outcomes, and that really kind of sets the tone for your findings and your conclusions and your recommendations, and then you start recognizing what kind of transformation the organization is going to have to go through to be able to get to those those outcomes that you see as part of the solutions. Okay, so decisions, because this topic too is all about decisions, it's all about making good choices. When I talked about opportunity cost, if you understand microeconomics at all, you'll understand that really knowing, what you're giving up to get, and it's got to be much better than the next best alternative. Otherwise, you wouldn't go there. When you do that, it forces you to analyze your best alternative with other options. All right, so it's not just pick one, and we're going to talk about satisficing, later on. And that's a test question, by the way. And by looking at the full scope of your choices amongst a reasonable amount of alternatives, will really get you to some optimum ways of looking at it. That's all I'll say until we get to the total quality management approach. All right. But what you're doing though, you don't want to isolate those choices without comparing them to other alternatives. And what you also need to know is, what are you comparing them with? You need to know, well, what's going to make you successful? What are your critical success factors? What's your criteria for making that decision? And there's loads of different types of criteria assessment tools. And we're going to kind of bridge on them a little bit. I'm not going to get into them in detail, but you should understand that they're there, and it allows you to be able to really make a really good, solid assessment of what it is, and do some serious critical thinking around what you're getting in the end and why it's the best alternative that you've chosen. And again, I keep on saying, organizations that ask the better questions, well, they result in the better outcomes. I mean, it's amazing. Research has proven that. And you can see in highlighting here, and we're going to talk about, there's a theorist that really talks about bounded rationality, but bounded rationality is a human decision-making process. And what that means is, you can see I'm using this word again, this test word, we attempt to satisfice rather than optimize. So what happens is, what bounded rationality is, you'll say, okay, well, we're going to put some walls around, what we're going to look at to make this decision. And by putting those walls around, you haven't looked at what's outside of that could impact your decision. And really, why are you putting the walls around it? Is because you want to get there quickly. You want to make that decision right away. And what have you done then? You've just satisfied yourself. Saying, okay, well, yeah, we know this is a reasonable decision. We can't see why it isn't. Let's do it. And you're really not looking at the optimum value of that decision. And that's what's counter. When you look at the optimum value, that's counter to satisficing in a decision. Okay. All right. So So this material here now relates to question 2 and assignment 2. And so that you should really kind of lock in on what this is all about, because you're going to be asked, well, what's your decision-making style? And, I'd like you to use these terms. Well, my style is directive style. And why? Well, it's action oriented. I'm a make it happen decision maker who's focused on the facts, right? As opposed to an analytical style. So, like accountants are a lot more analytical, and they look at lots of information and lots of alternatives to make sure that they're making the right decision. And then there's some people that have a conceptual style. Well, it relies on, really, where are we going with this? What do we have to, deal with in the future? And how does this have to, not lock us into a certain area in case we have to make a change. So that's a conceptual style. And then the behavioral style around is, okay, well, we need to make these decisions along the lines of who are we making this for, and they should be part of that decision as well. And really what that does in a lot of cases is it encourages a lot of buy-in by the decision participants because they're part of the solution. Okay, so those are some of the key ones, but how do we tie that now into the theorist and the theories? So I've added these slides to really give you a sense of, well, in terms of Frederick Taylor, well, in sort of classical category, scientific management theory was really the theory, and he emphasized efficiency and productivity. So that was the crux of making that particular decision, is how do we make this system more productive? How do we make it more effective? Where Henry Farrell talked about administrative theory, and lo and behold, a good test question around the 4 functions of management. He really created the foundational pieces around the 4 functions of management, talking about planning, organizing, leading, and controlling, all of which influence decision-making styles. So depending on your emphasis in those functions and the level that you're at, remember we talked about the 3 levels of management, the higher, the middle, and the lower level, that's going to have an effect on how you make decisions. Herbert Simon talked about bounded rationality, and that's decision-making, acknowledging that managers often make decisions with limited information. Why? Out of convenience. And that's why they could be satisficing, right? Within the constraints of their environment. And here's a key theorist, Daniel Goleman, talks about not only the 6 leadership styles, but his work on emotional intelligence. And we'll see that emotional intelligence or EQ, is one of the key recruitment criteria now for modern managers, because it allows them to really understand, different ways of getting things done and dealing with people in those particular ways. And it includes a lot more of the different types of decision-making styles, that are required within the situational conditions or the contingencies that they need to be aware of. James March and Herbert Simon, behavioral theory, how organizations make decisions, emphasizing the role of routines and bounded rationality and how people, will be affected in those areas. So, I go on and on. So here's some more that I'd like you to go through in terms of Peter Drucker. And we're going to talk about management by objectives, probably in about, I think it's topic 11, which will be likely a good test question at some point in time. And then, action science and crafting strategy. Henry Mintzberg, is still an acting professor at McGill University. He's the actual guru in strategic planning and did a lot of organizational dynamic type work or organizational development and in terms of structure and effectiveness of organizations. So that again affects the way decisions are made. And Hershey and Blanchard, here's where we're going to talk about situational leadership theory or contingency theory. And the answer is, it depends. It depends on the conditions. It depends on the level of capabilities of the employees that you're working with. So Henry, Hersey, and Blanchard are gonna go through that, and that makes a significant impact on the way that you make decisions. And then Michael Porter, he's really mainly he's taken those principles right into tools. And Michael Porter is well known for competitive strategy and strategy analysis or business analysis, and so that there's things that you can learn there as well. Kurt Lewin, well, the change management model, we're going to talk about that, and the unfreeze, change, and refreeze process, really important. Probably a test question around that. Edward de Bono, not so much we're going to talk about, but he merits looking at the 6 thinking hats. And what it is that the 6 thinking hats gives you 6 different perspectives, and that's, it really kind of emulates diversity, where you have different types of people with different types of backgrounds, and the multiple perspectives get you to the most thoughtful alternatives around, decision making. And then Peter Drucker, management by objectives, those are those are key on getting that done. And what management by objectives is that it's a cascade of negotiations, from what are the key goals and objectives of the organization, and now the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer, will individually negotiate with each one of their direct reports. So the CEO will say negotiate with the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, and agree to what the Chief Financial Officer goals are going to be and how it's going to relate and align with the overall corporation goals. And then that CFO will take a look at their direct reports and then negotiate their direct report goals. And that's what MBO is all about. It's a cascading. And so by the time that you get down to the lowest level in the organization, those goals should be totally aligned with contributing to the higher level goals all the way to the the outcomes or goal outcomes of the organization. So that's what that's all about. Just to give you an idea, where I fit, right, in terms of what's my predominant style. Well, I'm really high on the conceptual and really high on the analytical side. Well, of course, I'm a chemical engineer, and that's kind of what drives me. And again, so not as much in terms of being a directive decision maker or a behavioral type decision maker. It's all about where are we going and how is this going to fit into the overall piece of getting to the best place for the organization. And that's where I kind of fit in. Is that right or wrong? No, that's who I am. But I'll tell you though, if we were, I ran a lot of projects, and if we were getting behind, in terms of our due dates, well, all of a sudden this little bubble here would move right into, directive and saying, hey, all right, okay, by next Monday, we're going to do this, this, and this, and this, and this. Right? And that's the whole idea, is to have that predominant style, but then have 4 or 5 different decision-making styles in your back pocket to be able to adjust to certain conditions on what's going on. And the whole key around this is, how does this affect triple bottom line? All right. So we can't lose sight of that, because, we're into the empathy, trust, end of the development timeline of management principles. So we have to keep in mind, well, how is this going to affect the environment? How is this going to affect the people that work for us, the society that we're impacting, our customers? And then, oh, by the way, we still have to make some money. All right. So that's what this is all about. Okay. So again, so have to take a look at this piece, and again, understand now, you're going to be asked, well, how does this fit, with, how does your style fit with Frederick Taylor? Or if it does, mention that. You'll see the questions when they get specific, on all these different pieces. So if you're going to talk about analytical decision making, you're going to look at Herbert Simon. If you're going to talk about conceptual, you're going to look at James March and Herbert Simon's behavioral theory. If you're going to, those kind of pieces. So that's what that's all about. Okay, I normally would do a breakout, but we don't. We just have a few people, and we have a lot of material. So I'm just going to pass through these breakout slides. But again, now here's these three documents or files that I want you to kind of be key and to go through, and this will help you in assignment number 2. And I'm showing you with this video that I'm going to come out with tomorrow, how important each one of these documents is to answering those questions. Okay, so the first one, the brief history of management, I highlighted that at the beginning of the webinar. Here's the link to go in, and this really gives you the whole a series of management theories, the theorists that contributed to them, and the link to some of the management principles and tools. So go through that and you really get a sense. And I recommend that you review this particular presentation before each test, right? They'll come in really handy. The next one is really showing you how the tools and techniques for each theory and management principle come together. And it's laid out in terms of the theory, the theorist, the management principles, and then the actual tools and techniques that you're going through. And you'll see a lot of them there that are in the participation activities that we're covering. And then the next one is the connection between, what is this survey doing for me? And you're going to do some 30+ surveys and Pearson Revel, and what's it touching on? Who created this basically, and what theory does it, management theory does it relate to? And so that you really get a sense of how this all comes together. Okay. Right. So here's the questions that you're going to cover. And again, I can't stress enough that, I'm serious about marking these because I want to provide you with the best feedback that I possibly can. And what really helps me, so help me help you, is that if you use the structure that I've given you and use the numbering that I've given you, so that when I'm in a particular question, I know exactly where you're at and what you've done, and use the main header. What kind of manager are you? So use that main header so I know that that's what you're answering. And then when you actually go to A, B, and C, use the subheader to know, what kind of manager are you? So that I can really walk through this with you. And that's the part of the situation where, where you're helping me help you, because the easier that you make it for me to really give it a good sense of evaluation, the better marks that you're going to get. Right? I'll promise you that. Okay, so it's basically 7. And what I'm going to tell you now is that in question 7, and as I alluded to it right at the beginning of the webinar, it's related to organizational structure, which we're not covering in this webinar in terms of topic 2 and topic 3. It's in topic 4, but topic 4 I'll cover that after the actual assignments due. So one of the prescribed sources of information, which is on the assignment instructions, covers organizational structure, and it should give you enough information to be able to answer this particular question. Okay, so, and if you have any problems with that, email me, and I'd be happy to bring you through that. Here's another article. You can see how artificial intelligence can help leaders make better decisions under pressure. It's another article that keep in your back mind, keep these presentations, because I'm sure when you get out of this program and you're in a management, you're going to be able to use that. So I just got, Alyssa just gave me a question here. So could we please go through example answers for questions 3 to 7, like for the organization structure? Would we just pick a matrix or bring in centralization? Okay, that's a great question, Alyssa. So I'll go into that right now. Okay, so bear with me here because I'm going to have to go into documents. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the actual revisions I did to the assignment instructions, which are, they're in Google Docs right now. So you can pull that piece out. So I'm actually going to go into my Google Docs and I'm going to pull it out. So Okay. Okay. So let me show you that. So let's go to question number 7. All right. Okay. So it's here. What type of organizational structure would you be most successful working in, and why? All right. So you look at these little square bracketed notes. Use information from support document 1A. Okay. And under, because there's about 5 articles I combined in that particular file. And the one article I want you to go to is how to choose the right organizational structure for your business. Right? So that will give you a good idea to answer this question. Okay, so that's where that piece is. So let's go to support document 1A, right? Okay, so there's support document 1A, and then I will actually go in and go to the link on this. I don't know if I can do that. No, okay, okay. Okay, so that's bringing, and then you need to go all the way down in this document to find that title. All right, so I'm going down in that title. Getting there, just about there. So essentially what I've done is I've given you all the information that you would have to research by yourself to do this. Um, Okay, so here we are. This is an article, and this is the link to the article if you want to go directly to it. How to choose the right organizational structure for your business. So here are the types, and so you can understand what they are. There's a functional organizational structure, and what's that? It talks about what it is and then what it does, the pros and the cons. A divisional organizational structure, a matrix organizational structure, a flat organizational structure, a network organizational structure, and then you pick one of those that works for you, and then answer that particular question. Okay, and then let's just go to, what was that question again? Okay. Okay. Okay, so identify the organization structure you would be most successful working in. All right, so that's based on what you do. And then briefly describe the attributes of this organization. It's still there in that piece. Uh, and then describe why that particular organization structure attributes would best help you be most successful. And the reason why I'm asking this particular question is because, and I've done this myself, all right? When you're going to apply for a job, if you understand what your predominant management style is and your predominant decision-making style is, then you're better off to pick a company, not because it's going to pay you more salary. It's good. You pick a company and you take a look at their website and you look at their corporate culture and how they do things and decide, do I have a good fit? And that's where you go, is you go to an organization where you have the best fit. And that way you'll be less stressed out. You'll be able to maneuver in the actual culture, that corporate culture that's going on, rather than picking a company saying, well, I'm a smart person, I could probably do a good job there. And you go there and you're kind of fighting upstream, the way that you'd like to make decisions, or you're fighting upstream the way you'd like to treat people in your own organization. Right? So is it going to be the optimum, absolute nirvana? No, but it really gives you a balanced a view going in. And then you still need to understand how you need to adjust, to having different uh, um, decision-making management styles outside of your predominant style. Different management styles itself outside of your predominant management style to be able to accommodate. And that's where Hersey and Blanchard, that's where we're going to talk about, contingent theory and situational analysis, right? So Alyssa, does that answer your question? You can unmute if you like. Okay, good. All right. Anybody else have any questions about that? Thank you very much for that. That was a good question. Okay. All right. So those are the kind of things I'm probably going to tell you in this recording that I'm making about this assignment tomorrow. Okay. Okay. So here's okay. So normally when I switch like that, sometimes I lose sound or I lose sharing. So is everything okay? Can you hear me and can you see the presentation on this on your view? Okay, great. Thanks. Okay. Uh, So how artificial intelligence system can improve decision making. So again, I've had an extensive background in corporate planning, and I did a fair amount of scenario planning. And what scenario planning is, it's about really looking at three plausible um, outcomes that you could shoot for and under certain conditions. And and it's not the fact that one of them may happen, it's the fact that you brought the right kind of people together in the organization to think about, how would you respond to those pieces. And and the thing is that that's the key piece around scenario planning. But AI is just amazing, and to be able to come up with three plausible once you feed it the right information. Like I did a small scenario planning example for you, and I can't remember where I put it, but it's out there in your course to really get a sense of how AI really does help you do scenario planning. And what it does, though, it can do real-time tracking and improve prediction on the ground of business developments. It gives you a virtual role play, and it's generative. So it's good sounding boards. So this has really put scenario planning on steroids. It's really kind of helped organizations really get to the crux. And why is because guess what? There's more and more and more and more uncertainty in today's economical systems, and you can see that now with the tariffs piece going on in the world. People, businesses don't know what's going to happen, and here's where scenario planning could really come to light in terms of looking at the most plausible outcomes, and then how people can deal with getting there. And once the people kind of go through the discussions, well, then they can be a lot more responsive, and they'll be a lot more insightful when they get back into their area saying, oh, you know what, we should change the way we do this particular thing in case this could possibly happen. And it really improves preparedness. So I can't say enough about that piece. Okay, so here's a different kind of decision model, and it's a free for all right? But I've used it, and I've used it in what I call town hall meetings. Like, I facilitated groups from 6 people to 300 people. And what the garbage can model is, it's a way of there's no holes barred. You can set an agenda of many types of topics and allow like decision tables of people to be able to work on those particular problems and solutions, right? And the only thing is that it's really hard to nail down, to come out of there with what you wanted in the first place. But it does uncover some unbelievable issues and unbelievable solutions for going through. So, and again, you can see this is highlighted. So this is something that you should be studying. But it's a resolution to solve a problem. It gives you a lot of oversight, and the thing is, it could identify an additional problem. It could morph into something different. So the thing is, it's unrestricted, and it gets to where you can go. But the whole piece though is if you're lucky enough, to bring this together and the participants feel that they're part of that solution, then you got a lot more buy-in. And that buy-in is just so important, in terms of making a transformation in your organization. If you don't have buy-in, you'll have thought leaders that will oppose and go behind the scenes and really kind of dissolve your approach, or go against it. All right. So what I did was I put this slide into so that you know what an organized anarchy is, but basically it's a sense of chaos. And organized anarchies are organizations or decision situations, they're characterized by, different types of organizations and illegitimate organizations. So that's one decision-making model, is the garbage can model. You just got to be careful on how you use it and where you use it, and if you're on a short fuse to try to resolve something, that's not quite the medium to choose when you need to make a really strong decision, on a very important issue that has serious consequences. Okay, so let's look at decision making in the organization. And the thing is that you can have group decisions and you can have individual decisions. All right. So as a manager, the lunchroom needs to be painted. I'll decide, you know what, we're going to paint it yellow, right, and get it done, right? And why? Okay, so didn't cost me anything to make that decision. It's going to be painted in 2 days, and it gets done. All right. But now, if you decide, okay, how do we want to manage the cafeteria or the lunchroom cafeteria so that we have the best in engagement of employees and it's a really a good way to relax and whatever. Well, then you may want to bring the group in and get input, and basically leverage the creativity of the group. And the whole idea too is to get buy-in on what's going on, right? So those are the pros and cons of a group and an individual decision. And group size matters, right? And if you get a group, especially larger than 10 people, you're going to have too many differences in opinion and too many perspectives to really kind of agree on what you can be doing. And just as an aside, for assignment 4, Amazon's Bezos, he created this 2 pizza rule. And what that meant is that if you bring a group together, it shouldn't be any larger that can eat just 2 pizzas, right? And so what they're really focusing on that size to have the optimum number of people to be able to make good decisions as quickly as possible, but as comprehensive as possible. So those are the trade-offs, that you really need to worry about. And so here on the group decision making, well, pool of knowledge, it's seen as more legitimate, deeper commitment to decision. But you can run into it's less efficient. You might have the lesser of impact to engage everybody to agree with it. I remember living in Edmonton many years ago, and there was this building that got built, and it had all kinds of different structural pieces to it. And the magazine article said this building was designed by committee, and everybody got their own way. All right, so you can get a less effective decision because you're trying to get a consensus across the thing. And then another thing is that, and we're going to talk about this, and you can see that it's highlighted, right? Pressure to conform. You got to worry about groupthink. And if you have a group of people with a very strong leader, normally what happens, and I can think of where the group leader is so strong that everyone will kind of just placate the leader saying, oh yeah, I agree. And what happens then is you don't get a good diverse set of alternatives because everybody's thinking the same way, because they know that hey, we want to placate the leader, and it's just not worth the hassle to bring their opinion. Or in some cases, you have like a board that has been working together for like 10 years, and they've made all these decisions together, and now they don't try to change anything. They're all thinking the same way, and that really just is a disadvantage for what's going on. So this can be a really big issue in organizations, and it undermines critical thinking, and it reduces the objectivity of what's going on, and you don't have that critical thinking and that critical analysis of what needs to get done. And so here's some other reasons. Members are afraid to speak out, assume consensus if no one speaks up. And then how do you minimize it? Well, you use de Bono's 6 thinking hats, where you assign different types of perspectives to different people to represent those perspectives, and then encourage, that it's a safe location to make decisions. No one's going to get, disadvantaged or hurt because they express their opinion, it's a free thinking medium to be able to get things done. Bounded rationality, I talked about that, and you should really understand what that is. And so what is it? It's you need enough time and resources to brainstorm those alternatives. And if you don't, you get into satisficing. This has been highlighted a few times. So it's really important. And so understand what this is. And it's a modification of theory of rational choice that takes into account the cognitive limitations of decision maker. All right. So here's one. I still remember this little saying. This person lost their keys at night. All right. And they're looking for it under the street lamp. Why? Because there's light. It doesn't make any sense. That's not probably the place that they lost them, right? So those are the kind of things you need to think about with bounded rationality. Okay, so approaches to decision making. Well, you need to understand these different things in terms of are you bounded ethically, bounded rationality, bounded willpower, bounded self-interest. And those are the things that get overlooked or employed for shortcuts, right? And those kind of things. So that really gets you away from biases, and it gets you away from short-circuiting the evaluation of reasonable alternatives to really compare and exercise criteria to make particular decisions. Okay, so I got a fair amount of background in total quality management. I ran a quality group at TELUS for a couple of years, and here's the piece. In TQM we had this rule that we would never look at anything less than 3 alternatives for a solution. And why is that? Is because we're not as good as conceptualizing as we are as for comparing as human beings. So when we have to compare with a set of criteria, then we really get a good sense of what these alternatives are all about. And normally what would happen is that we would look at 3 alternatives and take a look at the pros and cons and the different criteria of really what we were trying to satisfy. And we'd land up taking the best from every one of those 3 and create a 4th alternative that we never would have thought of. All right. So that's really what the rational decision-making process is all about. So the key is identifying the problem is 90% of the solution. Excuse me, I'm gonna, so identifying the problem as understood is just so key. Then you establish the criteria, how you're going to evaluate that decision. And then sometimes some criteria are more important than others. So you give them a higher weight. And I'll show you how to do that in an example as we go through. And then you generate these alternatives, then you evaluate them, and then you select the best alternative. And remember, you're always thinking about opportunity cost, right? What do I have to give to get? And why is this better than the next best alternative. Okay. Okay. So the traditional decision-making process, and I get back to what I said earlier, is that you really should pick a particular decision-making process that you can internalize. And oh, by the way, if you've got the steps baked into your head, you get into a group and all of a sudden you look brilliant because you can lay this all out on the board and say, this is how we could make this decision, right? So here, you identify the problem, you identify the decision criteria, you allocate the weights, you develop the alternatives, you analyze the alternatives, you select an alternative, you implement that, and then you're always evaluating because sometimes a lot of the assumptions that you make are fleeting. It's the best information you have at the time, and you have to test those assumptions on a continuous basis, especially if your decision it was crucial and you need to recalibrate. And again, here's I put this in, what the problem is and what the problem isn't, right? And that's Kepner-Treagle thinking, by the way. And a clear definition of the problem is 90% of the solution. So, that's the way to look at it. So here's a way of doing a factor rating analysis. So what factor of a decision is important for Starbucks? All right. And then how important relative to each other are these factors? And that's where you put a weight together. And then you evaluate these factors against 3 different locations. And then you get a score. And then the one with the highest score really gives you the idea. So here's an example now. So labor availability, it's worth 25% of the decision making, right? So 0.25 out of 1. You can see that tax structure is the most important factor. It's almost 40% of the decision making. So what you do is you have a score for that labor availability. You're looking at either locating in France or Denmark. And so that France has a score of 70, you multiply that factor, 0.25, and you get a score, all right? You multiply this factor times this score, and then you get, a particular score. And then what happens is you add them up, and you can see that France has the highest score. So from a factor analysis point of view, you locate your business in France and not in Denmark. So that's how that works. And then to remember too, and then decision making or managerial style and managerial decision style is highly dependent on the types of decisions that you have to make. So you need to understand the difference between a structured problem and an unstructured problem. So a structured problem is, I want to return a smartphone. Right. So it's, you know the steps, right? You know what needs to do. You know what the rules are. You know what the policies are. And so that it's easy so that it can be dictated almost, through, a computer-driven platform. And the thing is then you don't need any type of management style that needs to accommodate, engage creativity, right? It's just when we're really talking about, a directive style where, you've got a quota to meet in terms of how many smartphones are returned, and that's what it does. Versus an unstructured problem, which means that it's really complicated. In some cases, no one's ever solved this problem before. And what you need to do is then you need to bring experts in to be able to take a look at creating the alternative solutions to be able to deal with that unstructured problem. So as a manager, you're likely have no idea from your limited expertise in related to this problem. So you need to rely on these subject matter experts to be able to come up with that. And the worst thing that you can do then is micromanage them, right? You got to allow them the room to be able to be creative, to be able to experiment a bit. And so that means you need a different management style to be able to accommodate that, right? So that's how that all comes together. Okay, and then, what are some of the conditions? Well, some decisions, taxes, that's a certainty, you're going to get taxed, right? So you can put policies in that. But Do you know how much risk that could be in terms of how much tax is going to be applied? And that might put your business in jeopardy. And you may not know, if the next government coming in is going to change the tax structure overall, total uncertainty. So those are the three kind of things that, you always need to be aware of when you're making these decisions. How certain is it? How much risk is involved, which means how important is this? Could it eliminate my business, or could it make me really rich if I you know, take advantage of the opportunity in a strong and quick way? How likely is this to sustain itself? All right. So those are the kind of things that you take a look at. And now there's this decision matrix called how do you deal with that with 3 steps. I'm not going to go through it, but I've got a really good video so just know about it. You don't really know how to figure it out, but here's how it works. So there's the Maximax, which you maximize the largest possible gain, but a lot of risk. The Maximin, where you maximize the minimum possible payoff. And then Minimax, where you minimize the maximum regret. So this is kind of the least risk approach to take that. So it all depends on how risk averse you are in making that decision based on, are you betting the whole company, on this particular deal or whatever. So that you can see on a Maximax, you can see on a large expansion, if oil prices rise, you could make $9 billion from that expansion, say in 1 year. But if nothing changes, you could lose $10 billion. And if oil prices fall, you could lose $20 million. So that's the way you look at it. Whereas if you look at the Minimax, well, the maximum regret would be, like 8 million here. So that's what you could lose. So here's some definitions to go through. And then if you go to this video, it actually goes through an exercise to really kind of explain this piece for you. And now we're into another area called cognitive bias. It's the participation topic 2A. And what I'm asking you to do is I'm asking you to pick one of these. All right. And then what I'm asking you to do is that once you've picked one of these, and there's different ones, then you need to explain to me why it matters. Remember to explain, why did I choose this one? So you say, okay, so the cognitive bias that I've chosen is overconfidence bias, and this is what it does. Okay, and this is why I've chosen it based on a previous experience, or based on, I think this is one of the more prominent type of bias that people, business people occur, those kind of things. All right, so that's really what I'm asking you to do in this participation 2A. Okay, so the role of AI in decision making, just be cognizant of that. Humans can't process all information. Where it's really going to come in is that it can just about do anything. And I'm going to show you a graph where it's going. Okay. So these are the types of decision makings AI can do. But the whole idea is that, again, let's think about your role as a business practitioner, as a manager inside of an organization. AI may not replace you, but someone using AI may replace you. So you really have to come up to speed on this. And here's where it really shines, is that AI can go through big data, and we're in the age of big data. Big data is being, accumulated all over the place. If you take a look at even, in the crypto market, there's all these huge data centers that are being built. And no doubt AI has to kind of process all that information. All right. And so it will get to possible actions, but here's where you bring in human judgment, and other non-digital type of implications, and then you make those decisions. Here's where you play, but this is a whole piece that will replace hundreds of people. There's I've got some statistics somewhere that, there's some areas in law that it can replace, like 10 lawyers, and get something out in a day. But here's what's going on is that there's four types of data analytics. So one is descriptive. So what it is that AI will kind of take a look at that and then say, inside of that, there's some key factors that have an impact on the market, say, all right? And then it'll further look at those key factors and say, oh, and this is how those factors impact that market. All right. And then it could get smart enough as it learns and say, oh, yeah, so, here's what it's done so far, but now we know how it behaves. And we're saying, here's how it's going to impact, over the next 12 months. All right. And then, it learns so much about being, descriptive, diagnostic, and prescriptive. It says, oh yeah, and in the next year 2 and 3, you need to do this as a business. Boom, 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 boom. In terms of, doing remedial or dealing with these impacts or mitigating, your risks. So that's what this is all about, and that's where AI is going. And the more that it goes from a tool to an agent, the more it's going to be on the prescriptive side. Okay, so the role of decision making, it's all about decision augmentation, predictive or prescriptive analytics to recommend alternatives. So that's where that's going. And just understand, this is just a place mark here for assignment number 4. Go to this slide and have a good read of what this is all about, to answer the Amazon questions in assignment number 4. Here's this 2 pizza rule that I talked about. Bezos brought in: no more people in a meeting than 2 pizzas can feed. And that really gets down to, optimum decision making. And then, the different styles of effective leaders. And I would go through these pieces, to go through. And what I've done is I've actually, identified the title of each style, and that's what I'm looking for in assignment 2. And I've identified the theorist and what it involves, so that this key amount of slides here will really help you get through assignment number 2. Okay. And how do you identify your own management style? Well, this is what Pearson Rebel is doing. It's allowing you to do a self-assessment. There's feedback mechanisms that human resource programs called. It's called a 360, where you can get people, different type of people that you interact with to evaluate, how you're doing. Then understand those different styles. See what works in terms of the corporate culture in your organization. Understand what your values or your core values and goals are, and then you experiment and adapt, and you do some continuous learning. And what you should come out of there is understand what your predominant style is. And oh, by the way, there's a just trying to remember the theorist. What's his name is Massey, and he came up with this concept: you are what you are because of what you were when. Okay, and what that means is that if you go through an absolute significant emotional event, it could be a catastrophe, one of your corporate buildings have fallen apart, you've gone through a major life change or whatever, that will change your outlook. And when your outlook changes, chances are your management style may change. So just be aware of that. All right, is that you're basically have a predominant management style based on your environment, your conditions, your values, and everything else. But if something changes, your predominant style may change. All right, it may make you a different type of manager, and just be aware of that. And then understand that you should have at least 3 or 4 more management styles in your back pocket to deal with the things that happen, either the condition of your workforce or the makeup of your workforce, and then the conditions of the business that you're operating in. Okay, so this is just a piece on this true colors. Just to understand, you can see there's a golden key here. This organized gold this is the most relevant attributes of an effective manager. So is it the ideal absolute best? Well, that's really where, organizations look for when they're recruiting. So just be aware of that. There's probably something to know about that. And then know something about this one Big Five personality traits test is probably one of those prominent tests that some HR recruiters will have you go through, right? So it's a good to know, what this is all about as well. And here's all the positive effects of good decision making, how you can make better decisions. And that really, you should have a look at if you want to improve what you're doing on. And here's the article that I pull that off of. Just one more little advertisement. There's a guy by the name of Jeff Olson, and he come up with this interesting piece about, you don't you don't get somewhere overnight, right? And what you're doing is it's the simple things that you do right that add together and create, a compounded outcome. And so that, if you make these good decisions, little by little every day, be it at work, at home, personally, whatever. Well, at the end of that, through compound interest, if you understand compound interest, how it grows, it goes faster and faster, as you do more over time. And the whole, the corollary or whatever it's called, the opposite of that is that if you're not doing certain things, well, then what'll happen is, you're going to land up with health problems, or you're going to land up with, a bankruptcy or whatever. So it's the actions and the habits that all come together. So what I'm saying is, when you're making decisions, be consistent. You make decisions based on, your core values and what you think is important, and based on the criteria that, of which the organization that you work for, is more involved in. All right. So those are the kind of things. And this is probably one of the best books I've ever read on making decisions. And it's by Chip and Dan Heath. These guys, one's a marketer and the other guy was an educator. And it really brings things to light with stories, and that's how you learn things better. Um, and just one more thing. So we're going to talk about Edward Deming at some point in time, and he really came up with this particular way of making decisions, and and he called it, it was a little bit off, but this is sort of came out of total quality management, an improvement, or not an improvement, I guess, a simplification of what he came up with, and it's just plan, do, check, act, and yeah. So Deming had he called it the PDSA, wheel of or the short cycle, but this is used throughout total quality. So what you do is you identify that problem, you test those solutions, and then you study that, and then you implement that solution. But in the spirit of continuous improvement, you're doing this all the time. And that's why they have quality circles, and like, say, in Honda's manufacturing plants, where they have people come together just before the end of the shift, and they talk about, okay, what worked in this shift, what didn't work, how can we improve, this particular issue, and they do it every day, and so that they can bring innovation, and they make better decisions around, how they're going to create work and get to the right outcomes, right? So that's basically topic 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a 10-minute break, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to do topic 3. Topic 3 should be a little bit shorter, okay? But if you have any questions, you can unmute right now, or you can just put them on the chat, and I can field them later on. But in any case, what you can do is just email me. And like I said, if your question is of any value to your colleagues, I will actually post the answer on announcements in Blackboard as well. Okay, so it's 2:29 right now, and so I'll be back in about let's say yeah, I don't know, 20 to 3. Okay. Okay, I'm back. Aaron just asked a great question. Asked if, what's going to be required in terms of tests. The best way you can find out is go to topic 4, and in topic 4, near the end of the topic, you'll find 3 practice tests that you can do, and it'll give you a sense of, what type of questions will be asked and the format of those type of questions. Now, there won't be any calculations to be made. There won't be any like dates to satisfy in terms of, what theorists did what in what year. There, nothing like that. But the questions will be general, the mainly multiple choice, a few true and false questions, outlining, okay, some sort of policy, not policy, but management principle, so your comment, a couple of facts here and there. And again, just to get back to the highlighting and the golden keys gives you an idea of where those topics will, or question topics will come from. Okay. All right. Hope that helps. If you have any other questions, please email me or just include the chat. You can read what's going on. Okay. Good. Thanks for that question, Eric. Okay, so let's get started again. Now we're going to talk about topic number 3. And the thing is this has a big impact on assignment number 2 as well, especially, when it comes to ownership. And the key part of that as well is related to, working in a corporation versus working in a family business. And you're going to have to compare what your management style would be like working in a family business as opposed to working in Amazon. And the thing is that your core values don't change, but your style needs to reflect the conditions in both areas. And so that the readings that are shown for those questions, please go into them and get a sense of what's going on, and then you'll be able to answer those questions quite effectively. Okay, so we're going to look at business ownership, and it's for a lot of you that come through this program, you're looking at starting your own business, so it may give you some pretty good insights as to what to take a look at in terms of how to set your business up. Should it be a proprietorship? Should it be a corporation, and what type of corporation, and those kind of things, and what kind of partnership. So we're gonna go through that as well. Okay, we're not going to talk too much about the uniqueness of Indigenous businesses, but there's information in Blackboard, in that topic 3 that you could source, and if you want to find out more about that. Okay, so the due, what's due, or the deliverables. This supplement 1B, small and medium-sized enterprises. Again, it's a Robbins PowerPoint presentation. You can access that in the folder for topic 3 and go through it. It's got some really good, rich information that you can go through to really give you a sense of what's going to be on the test, and learn about small and medium-sized businesses and enterprises. We're going to talk about entrepreneurship in this topic as well. Okay, so this is it's really good material to go through. It's very rich, and this is the one on entrepreneurship. And here's what's due. So you can see that these surveys right here, excuse me, will have a big impact on the questions in assignment number 2. So, get them done, and, to get a sense of what's going on. I'm going to talk about locus of control a little bit, and you should really understand where you are on these pieces, and it'll really give you a better sense of how to answer the questions, on assignment number 2. Okay. Okay, so here's where we get into groups, and that's why I was sort of really stressing that the sooner that you can get the learning team charter done, the sooner the better. And what it is that it's just so important to understand how you could work much better. And I talked about, you're going to be involved in more virtual teams. You're going to be involved in working with people that you can, you're going to have some skills to be able to work with special people and special groups, I guess, from what I can say. But here's where you can start. So the first group team assignment is that understand that this is going to impact your team in activities 3A and 4A and 4B. And so what I'm asking you to do is that just pick an example of a business. And the more specific that you can make that example, the better off that you're going to be. And, when I say specific, it means that you can do a far more, critical thinking. So when you say, well, I want to do an accounting business, it doesn't do it enough. You want to say, well, I want Red Deer business tax accounting, and probably we'll do cost accounting as a specialty. The more that you can do that, and also you have to take a look at an example of a business that's larger than 5 people. And why? Because we're going to ask you to do some organizational structure questions to answer and deal with in topic 4. All right. So that's where that is. And what you need to do is you pick one of the options below. You can look at managing a small business. So you have that small business, but just make sure it's no less than 5 people. Or you can manage a family business. And that's going to change your perspective on that, one or the other. All right, but identify it. So if you identify a family business, provide specific information. Let me just show you that. So I'm going to get you to fill out this form so that it gives you the amount of specific information that you can do. And oh, by the way, I mean, some of these questions, well, they'll be hard to answer maybe a little bit. Use artificial intelligence. Go to ChatGPT or go to Copilot. And then let's just say that you have a beauty business, that specializes in skincare. Well, you can go to Copilot and say, provide me the list of main products and services for a beauty skincare business, and you'll get some good answers. But then at the end of the day, you'll have some better criteria to be able to make get more reward out of answering 3A, 3B, 4A, and 4B as well. Okay, so that's where that's coming from. So here's the specific guidelines. It can be a family business or it could be an existing business. So if you want to pick out a business that's in Red Deer or somewhere in the Philippines or whatever, as long as you fill out this information, that's fine. And it could be one that you're working on or you own or you want to create or launch. And so this kind of gives you all that piece about that. All right. Now so once you've chosen that business, now for 3A, I want you to identify the top 10 issues of managing that particular business, and then tell me, why the group chose those ideas. So this is, and I'm going to sound, like a resounding, repetitive instructor about. I'm always going to ask you, why does it matter? All right, so get used to it. You'll see it all over the place. Why does it matter? And so that's really to kind of give you a sense of doing some critical thinking. That's all it's for. I'm not looking for a paragraph, a short reason, but be economical and be like, sort of surgical in terms of showing me that you've thought about this and this is why. All right. Okay. Now the next one, you identify, and this is the entrepreneur side of this webinar on topic 3. So you identify the 10 strengths of effective entrepreneurs, down here, and then the short reasons. Why does it matter? Why did you choose these things? All right, and do that, and then understand too that there's different types of entrepreneurs. There's the traditional entrepreneur like Elon Musk. So what did he do? He founded, SpaceX, and he may have purchased maybe a small part of the space industry as a player, and then, he built it. But there's other types of entrepreneurs. They're called in-organization entrepreneurs, intrapreneurs. And I was one myself. So when I was in the power business, I actually created this offering on a turnkey proposal to encourage natural gas suppliers to convert their gas-driven engine to electric so that they can sell all the gas that they pulled out of the ground. And the thing is that that kind of service was never there. And I developed it right from scratch in terms of developing the business concept, actually putting together the infrastructure and the analysis and everything else to be able to make this a turnkey operation for customers, and actually sold the first offering for $780,000 revenue a year. All right, so I was an entrepreneur in that piece. So it doesn't have to be starting your own business or whatever to be an entrepreneur. So that's where that is. Again, here's where chapter 5 is not part of topic 3, but it's the last question, number 7, in assignment number 2. Just the way that it kind of this 7-week term kind of went. And so that reading this chapter will give you some insights into answering that particular question. Although, having said that, the information that are on the assignment instructions for basically the supporting document 1A has, near the end of it, a whole pile of stuff about, ownership. Okay, so that just organizational structure, so that you'll be able to answer that question, I think, fairly effectively. Okay, here's where I kind of wanted to give you an idea of, different management styles are required. And I'll just kind of flip through this. It's sort of my story, and I would ask you to do your story at some point in time. But just to show you the different types of, areas where I worked and whatever. So as a student, I worked in a bakery, and I worked inside the bakery, and I worked on the road selling bread, and it was a family-owned business. And the thing is that there was 3 brothers that ran that, and the youngest brother was a hands-on, detail-oriented leadership. He managed the operation. Right, the sales were run by the medium aged brother, and was really sales driven and had a whole different way of doing things. And then the oldest brother was more driven by tradition, and was associated with the family father that started the business. And he was more interested in, the traditional bakery products, the artisan side of the business, and making it more, appealing. And so, hey, this needed to, you needed a collaborative and flexible management style that balanced professional management with family dynamics. And I'll tell you, the family dynamics there was some pretty heated arguments, and it was a gong show at times. And so decision making involved multiple family members and heated discussions, and so that it had to be run a lot differently. All right. So then I worked underground. I was a hard rock miner, and I actually ran what they call a Wills rig. And what Inco stressed on was operational excellence. So here we're back down into Frederick Trader and the efficiency and effectiveness, which still is worked on today. And the thing is that bonus was dictated on time and motion studies. They would go down and they would actually look at the amount of work that got done in a certain time, and then they'd assign an incentive to going beyond those things. And then I worked in a refinery as an actual operator, and highly structured, safety-focused management style. It was all about, compliance with regulations. It was a carbonyl plant, which is, gas. If there was a gas leak, the risks, life risk was there. So heavily unionized environment, set of expectations for shared leadership. So that was different. And then I actually worked, because part of me is a chemist. I worked in their lab, and that was all on expertise and reliability of results and those kind of things. And then I worked in Ontario Hydronuclear, where I was basically a process engineer. And the thing is that the managers set priorities. Their processes had all kinds of redundancy. It was all about safety and and safety-centric management approach. So those are key, and then right in the end, I worked as a vice president at TELUS, a dynamic customer-focused management style, customer-driven, leaders drove an innovation and managed technical advance. The culture was driven by competitiveness. So, it was pretty pretty stressful at times, working in that type of business. And then switching over to teaching, I taught online for Phoenix and Meredith universities, and then Georgian College, and then I landed up here at Red Deer Polytechnic. But here in the college atmosphere, it's collaborative and it's student-centered approach. So each organization I worked for had unique needs. Different management styles were required that were driven by the unique organizational culture and stakeholder and competitive demands of markets and industries. So that's really what we're trying to show, is that, this is, in part two, it follows that evolution as well of management principles. And when we get into, Blanchard and his partner, it's all about, the situational management going through. So, think about that, and this might help you in your assignment number 2. What have you experienced? How did it make you feel? What did you learn from it? Something I just learned, and never forgot about, is that, if you get into, a situation, from manager to employee, and it gets pretty tense, uh, the that employee will not so much remember what you said, but they will remember how they felt. All right. And that's something key to kind of to remember about, how your management style can really kind of shape that engagement. All right. And again, to know this is that people don't leave companies, they leave their bosses, they leave their managers. And so you understand that. So, you need to characterize your style of management, to fit the conditions and understand, where you kind of fall back on, what's your predominant style? Because normally when people get stressed, they go, they fall back onto what they know. And sometimes it's not appropriate for the situation. Okay, so here we are, we're where are we fitting on this, this line of evolution? Different perspectives influence the roles of managers today. So again, yeah, I'm taking you back to the Robbins presentations. So if you want to know stuff about small and medium-sized enterprises and organizations, you're going to learn a lot here and be able to deal with test questions and the assignments themselves in Supplement 1B, and then take a look at Supplement 1C, to really get a little bit more insights into what entrepreneurship is all about. Okay, helpful hints. Hopefully, again, I'm trying to help you with your future. And here's what I've learned. I've moved up the ladder in my in different organizations that I work for. But what I found was it's one thing to be a business practitioner and do what you do really well. But I'll tell you, if you tack on a professional, a PMP certification, and this is a project management professional certification, I've seen a lot of people that particular qualification was just icing on the top to really get them to flourish and be capable in any kind of position. And matter of fact, I've worked for a few associate deans that had masters in education but had a PMP certification. And why? And what it is that you learn project leadership skills, you learn influencing and negotiating skills, budget, risk management skills, critical and problem solving. So it really is a well-rounded accreditation to have. And here's the link if you're interested. And it's probably better to get into that system and get it done, and sooner than later. And it looks really good on a resume. So that's all I'll tell you on that one. Another thing is that this book here, if you're a small business person and you want to, really learn how small businesses works and how to survive, This is probably one of the best books that I've ever read. It's by Michael E. Gerber, and it's called The E-Myth Revisited, why most small businesses don't work and what to do about it. It's amazing, what this guy can teach you. All right. And it reads like a rag, if I can say that. It's a really good short book to read, and easy to read. All right. This is a little piece, that I've been doing consulting now for many years, and I create what I call these business knowledge maps. And this is what I've learned, in terms of a strategic framework, because one of my wheelhouses is strategic planning. But this is the key right here. All right. The value proposition is the key component that drives execution. You know exactly what you're doing for your customers and why. And inside of that value proposition, you've already intonated what your strategy is. And this little drawing here, this is it's a values discipline by Tracy and Wiersema. And what it says is what's going to be your focus in that value proposition? What is it that you're going to do for your customers that are going to be gains, and how are you going to manage their pains? And then elaborating on that value proposition is your strategy. That's what gives you competitive advantage. That's why you do strategy, is to create competitive advantage. And if you don't have the sense of a business model on how you're going to execute on that strategy, then you're at a loss, right? So if your strategy is right, your business model builds in competitive advantage, then it's all about execution of the value proposition. So that's really the crux, that I wanted to share with you, that I can help. And here's Mr. Osterwalder, he's one of my heroes. Here's one of the best value proposition canvases that you can work with, and I'll talk about that a little more when we get into the ideal customer, because this is something you should understand before you even start the ideal customer workings. Okay, your business model. This kind of outlines, what this is about. And here's what I used to do. Like I consulted with a lot of small businesses, a lot of one-person operators or family operators. And most people that I dealt with didn't really know what their business model was. And you know what? You can put it, you can put it on a one page, right? And by doing that, and here he is, Alex Osterwalder. If you look him up, you can actually find a spreadsheet on how to do this as well, on the internet. And putting this business model together really gives you a sense of what your business is all about and what's important. And when you onboard employees, going through this with them, really understand, they get an understanding of the business where they can make better decisions, for the better outcomes of your business. So that's key. Okay, one more thing. The BDC, the Business Development Bank of Canada, if you ever want any information about, starting up a business or whatever, most of it, it's free, right? And all you need to do is just go to this link and submit, to them. So I get their newsletter on a regular basis, and I find out about free tools and advice, and look at all the areas that they can help you in terms of business strategy and planning, or marketing and sales, or money and finance, entrepreneurial skills. There's all kinds of things they can help you with. So that's where it's at. Okay, wanted to tell you a little about what is benchmarking. And we used to, one of the organizations I work with, we used to call it copy and perfect, right? But it really, what it is that you want to do something that's best in class. That's a total quality management term, best in class. That's like the most effective and efficient operation that you could possibly put together, in a certain part of your business, or in all parts of your business for that matter. And that's what benchmarking does for you. So let's just say that you want to be able to manage your supply chain, on where you're buying your products from, in your business. Well, where would you benchmark? Well, one of the benchmarks would be Walmart. Like Walmart is in some cases military grade or better when it comes to inventory management, procurement, supply chain, feeding the shelves, and point of sale information. And so that you would go to Walmart, and you'd have to ask them to be able to go visit and what's going on, and you'd actually take a look at a key process that they have that you would like to emulate, and you analyze it and say, oh, these are the drivers. This is what makes it so great at Amazon. And then you go back to your own organization and say, okay, will that fit in my organization, or how can I make it fit? Because sometimes it doesn't quite fit. And so what you're doing then is that you want to compare certain areas of your business to certain businesses in your industry to see if you're operating at the same levels. And if you're not, if you're below level, then you go visit them and you benchmark them. You say, you take a look and see what's going on. If you're above, then you say, this is a competitive advantage. I want to protect this, so I want to make sure that they don't learn from me. All right, that kind of thing. So benchmarking is an important, continuous improvement and quality initiatives that are even part of Six Sigma, and that's another story. So if you want to know, the ultimate in total quality management, look up Six Sigma, and if you become a Six Sigma, a black belt, you can work anywhere in the world, and with a great salary and great working conditions. Okay, then we're going to now, what is locus of control? And locus of control is associated with higher effectiveness and in leadership and better group performance and entrepreneurial activity. So if you have an internal locus of control, that means that you can make things happen. You could say, hey, I'll deal with that. But if you have an external locus control and say, oh yeah, you know what, inflation's too high, this market is saturated, there's really nothing I can do, so that it's sort of victim mentality. So you don't have the wherewithal to drive your business, to drive people to a certain sense. So the more of internal locus of control you have, the more you have the capability to see possibilities and jump on them and make it work. Okay, so why do people start businesses? There's many reasons. Some is that that's something they always wanted to do, or that's something the family's been doing for generations. Or sometimes they want to create something in terms of achieving some great business objective. Sometimes they just want to be independent. Sometimes it's just it's just a gig they want to do for additional income. And sometimes those gigs out there, they turn out to be a main occupation because you start building a passion around it. Or they want to help their family, or they want to just provide products that aren't available some places. Or there's some personal service that's not in your area that's needed, that you say, hey, I can contribute to my community. All right. So what to understand is that, by the way, this slide here, I pulled right out of this Fundamentals of Management Supplement 1B, that Canada, it has a preponderance of small and medium enterprises. And understand this SME, because sometimes the questions in the test will say SME, and if you don't understand that it's small and medium enterprise, you may not be able to answer the question, all right? But look at this. They generate 45% of the private sector, gross domestic product in Canada. 86% of them are exporters. 98% of them have fewer than 100 employees. So really, we're a country of small business. That's really what makes our economy. They employ over 8 million Canadians. So you really need to understand that. So now we're getting into some highlighting. So we might be into some, some test requirements here. But look at this. I mean, between 2015 and 2019, the average number created annually was 101,000 plus, small and medium enterprises. Average number of businesses that disappeared. All right, and that's why I put you on to our friend Michael Gerber, because you really need to understand that a lot of businesses don't make the 5-year mark. and for various reasons, and so that you should understand that as well. Okay, and on average, 32% of small and medium-sized enterprises create the goods working, goods producing sector, survive at least 18 years. All right. And so that understand these statistics. And now we get into the types of business ownership. And what you need to know about that is sole proprietorship is fairly common, and in some cases I've owned a sole proprietorship, and what that means is that my name is on the business. So if the business gets sued, I get sued, right? So that you don't have that protection, and a way around doing that is you bring on business insurance to make sure that you have some protection. And then there's limited liability partnership, and partnership, limited liability corporation, and then corporations. So that there's a C corporation and S corporation, and you should know the differences around that. So we're going to get into some of those slides. So sole proprietorship, owned and run by one individual. Individual assumes the liability, all the debts, obligations. So you're on the hook. So your house is at stake here. Somebody, a creditor can take over your house. If you're not paying your debts, those kind of things. They pay self-employment tax. And it's difficult attracting a higher caliber employee because they say, well, this business is all about you and not me. And I could probably do a lot better if I worked in a corporate organization, where I have a lot more opportunity and a lot more benefits and a lot more advantage to move ahead. Okay, so that's a sole proprietorship. Partnership, two or more co-owners. Individuals share the risk, and this is an unlimited liability. Okay, and it requires clear rules and responsibilities. So the key thing is unlimited liability. So what that means then, say like I actually ran a partnership business with an individual, let's say David, all right, and so if David did something wrong and caused damage to a customer, well, that customer then could come right after the entire business. So it's unlimited liability. All right, so that's one thing about a partnership, is that you really need to decide what kind of partner that you're taking on. And another thing is, I can't say enough about, is that right even before the business has started, you should have a partnership agreement on expectations about how you're going to reward, how you're going to leave the business, all those things. And if you don't get that straightened out, no matter what kind of good partner that you have, there's always some misunderstanding of expectations. And then when you get into that, it could get ugly. All right, so understand that piece. Now, the corporation, here's where it's different. So a C corporation, and you notice that it's highlighted, right? So what happens is the corporation gets taxed, for income tax, and the employees that work for the corporation get taxed, in terms of, personal income tax. With an S corporation, what happens is the tax, passes through to the shareholders, so the shareholders pay tax, and so that's set up differently. All right, but the thing is that in a corporation, you can really kind of improve, the liability situation where they can't come after you as a person of the business. So here's a little more about C corporation and S corporation, for your benefit. And again, you can see that it's highlighted, all right? Okay, and now the types of arrangements. And the types of arrangements are pretty important. And let me just, I want to skip to just showing you this drawing, right? So here's what it is. This is sort of a continuum. So if you own something totally owned, right, and no partners, then you have the most control in the business. Okay. The only thing is that by being wholly owned with the most control, you may be capital limited. You may have a hard time trying to expand. You may not have a way in dealing with attacking the business, in terms of, alliance partners to be able to overall, create a stronger value proposition, right? On the other hand, if you don't want to invest, you can have, you'll probably have a lot of partners, and then you'll have the least control because you have your investment in the entity is so small. So that's what we're looking for. So you can see that here's a wholly owned business versus, a consortium or a joint venture or an equity alliance, which is, you still have a fair amount of sharing, and again, you still have a fair amount of control. But then when you get into this part, this is really kind of less, less control, and but less risk. Okay, so those are the kind of things that you need to look at. So let's go back now to this piece. So when you do a turnkey operation, that's there's basically a premier engineering company in Canada called SNC Lavalin, right? And what they do is they can build projects. So they'll go to Libya and they'll say, "We'll build you a power plant," and not only that, we'll handle it all. We'll buy the land, we'll buy all the equipment, we'll design it, we'll put it together, we'll recruit people to operate it, we'll train them how to operate, and then we'll hand it to you, the government, and then you give us a whole pile of money, right? That's a turnkey operation. You're turning it over, just like that, and that's how that works. So it's one way of working it rather than in a partnership, whatever. So the operator, the turnkey operator, has full control over that. Then there's a joint venture. So a joint venture is, I may want to get in. Let's say I have a cleaning business in Red Deer, and I may want to actually get into dry cleaning, because a lot of my cleaning clients, need dry cleaning, but I don't have enough money to buy a full dry cleaning business. So what I'll do is I'll either go to an existing dry cleaner and say, "Hey, I'd like to buy, a portion of your business so that we can have a joint venture," or I would maybe have another cleaner out there that's non-competitive, and we may come together and say, "Hey, you know what? Let's build a dry cleaning business that suits both of us," and that's a joint venture. Now, the whole idea is that if it's a 50-50 ownership, then no one has overriding control. And I worked for an organization called ATCO, and they would never get into a 50-50 joint venture. They'd always be 51-49 or 60-40, because they wanted strategic control over the business for obvious strategic reasons, right? And then there's what they call equity alliance, and that's a collaborative arrangement. But what that means is you might have maybe 4 partners, okay, and you as the major partner will own, 10% of partner A and 15% of partner B and 25% of partner C, which gives you, again, strategic control over the operation. All right, and that helps solidify collaboration. So that's how that works. So you can see, where you just own the whole thing yourself, the most control. But now, as a consortium or a joint venture or equity alliance, you're giving away some control. But now you've spread your capital, and you've spread your influence, and you've spread your capabilities to be able to maybe take in more market share in a certain area, right? So that's how that works. But how do you get started? How do you get started in a business? Well, some people start their own business from scratch. They decide, "Hey, I'm going to just build this business," or they can buy an existing business, or they can purchase a franchise. So I'll give you an example. So in Calgary here, back in the early 2000s, I decided that being a chemical engineer, I wanted to get into the water treatment business. So I looked at buying an existing water store business that had that sold purified water and sold some water treatment equipment and stuff. I thought, oh no, that's just too expensive. I don't have enough money to do that. So then I looked at purchasing a franchise. So I looked at different, I looked at the franchisor, water store that's what they were called, out of Ontario, and said, what would it cost me to buy a franchise, and what would I get from it? And I realized that, holy cow, it's, I'm still got to put out maybe, $80,000 at the time. And then I have limited flexibility to do what I want. I can't create other different products. And oh, by the way, all the stuff that they're going to teach me how to do, I know how to do, right? So I decided to start my own business, right? And so what I did was I created my own business, and it was a corporation, right? So I incorporated to make sure that, I could protect myself, and I had less liability. So that's how I got started. Okay, and so here's a kind of a table I put together, to be able to compare, starting your own business, buying an existing business, or purchasing. So there's different criteria. So look at, so initial investment, yeah, a lot lower. It cost me that. Buying an existing business off, was just too much money. And then purchasing a franchise, initial franchise fee, ongoing royalties. I didn't want to get into that, right? So that's what put me in this one. I had full control over my decisions and operation, but a lot higher risk. All right. And then, hey, I had to do my own marketing. I had to build my own brand, right from start. So those are the kind of things that, that you look at, how you're going to get into this, in terms of innovation and everything else. So that's where that is. So those are the things. So, you take a look at it and you see this is highlighted here. So start by a franchise, start your own, don't start your own, start, so I've explained that. So I'd like you to go through these pieces. Then there's licensing. So if you take a look at Microsoft, right? So they don't have an operation in France. They license the products to an agent in France, and then France has, that agent has full access to the French market. So it's the licensor, the people that own the technology, that license the rights to use the intellectual property, for, it could be trademarks, patents, technology for a specified period of time. And so that the licensor has less control over how the licensee operates, right? But the licensee typically pays a licensing fee. So it's one way of, so if you're going to go into another country, say, you're not going to have all that risk of not understanding the lay of the land in terms of business, but you can get into there, and then you find an agent that does know the lay of the land, and you can still make a lot of money, right? And then what you do then is the licensor will support the licensee in terms of guidance or technical support or whatever. And normally on the scope, the licensing is often used for specific products or technologies. So that's different from franchising, because franchising is there's a lot more control involved. It's the entire business model that the franchisor allows the franchisee to use, the right to operate and using its brand. And the franchisor maintains significant control and actually has safeguards in the contract saying if the franchisee, erodes the brand, if doesn't, keep up to the brand, if they say Tim Hortons franchises to a, franchisee in Sylvan Lake, and they don't maintain health requirements and everything else. Well, then the franchisors can say, hey, you know what, we're done. We'll settle, and you can't run that franchise anymore. And they will charge royalty fees, and then an initial fee, and then actually sell merchandise as well, like their products, so that the franchisee in Tim Hortons buys the coffee, buys the coffee cups, buys the donut batter, all from the franchisor. So there's a product flow, but the franchisor does all the marketing, all the international work, all the brand recognition. So they don't have to worry about that piece about it. Okay. And then franchising is used to replicate the entire business model, often allowed for rapid expansion and brand consistency. That's what that's all about. But here's the key differences to understand, the level of control. Franchising has a lot more control and standardization. And but licensing focuses on intellectual property more than it does on product itself. And while franchising involves a replication of the complete business system. And then support and training, franchisors provide comprehensive support. So basically, like, in the McDonald's, the new franchisee owner has to go to McDonald's University and learn, everything there is to do, to make a good, a consistent McDonald's product, right? Where licensors they offer limited assistance on what they'll allow. So here's another table that shows you that. But now we're getting into, these are the slides that you should really pay attention to in terms of assignment number 2. Okay, so understand, the types of decisions that are made in a family business, to understand what kind of management style and what kind of management decision style that you should have if you're going to work in a family business. And that's what you're going to address in assignment number 2. So the family decisions are, the design decisions, the value, the communications, and the plan for transition. And so I did a lot of work for federal development, in consulting for what they call the Community Futures Development Corporation. So what they are is, they're business lenders in all parts of Canada. And what we found is that most of these businesses, and there's a really kind of coming to a head in terms of baby boomers are at the end of their term in terms of owning this business, and they haven't created a transition plan. They don't have any idea if if they should sell the business or they should transition the business to part of the family. Or whatever, okay? And so the whole idea is that if you're going to get into a family business, you look at the whole life cycle and you make sure that you're planning, especially if you've got, the different parts of family, how are you going to operate to, how are you going to, sort of, transition that business, either liquidating it, like selling it outright, or liquidating it, or putting it onto another family. So these are all the things that you need to understand, with a family business. And then there's different types of family ownership. Sole ownership, one family member owns it all, and then a partnership, actively participating to be an owner, or concentrated. Any descendant can be an owner, but a subset has ownership control, or distributed. Any descendant is eligible to be an owner. So, you may have, the cousin who's rich and, will provide part of the capital, for so many shares in the business to get returns, those kind of things. So you got to understand that. And again, those kind of ownership structures, dictate, what the management style should be like, what the management decision style should be like as well. So amount of involvement, right? How involved is the family in governing? The more family members, the longer the decision takes, and the risk of conflict. The less family involved, the more wealth inequality across the family. So those are the kind of things that, you need to take a look at to answer questions in assignment number 2. And then the challenges, roles and rules are unclear. There's a lot of, sort of off the cuff operations, with no standards, that you would find in a corporation, and how do you deal with that? The creation of, different people who run various parts of the business that don't talk to each other, even if they're family, missing groups. So this will not be a test question, but here's one of the best frameworks that I've ever worked with, and I've used it in corporations as well. And what you do is, it's called a RACI framework. And what you need to do is you kind of identify the players in the business, and then you identify, who's actually responsible, who's accountable, who needs to be consulted, or who needs to be informed on different decisions that you make. So you can see here, hire, fire employees. Well, management's responsible, and the owner, or the board, or the family really don't want to get too involved in that. But if you want to hire or fire the chief executive officer, Well, the owner has to, is responsible for that. The board is accountable for that. And the family has to be informed of what's going on. So that's how you do that. So you can do that for some key business pieces, inside of the family business, to be able to complete that RACI. And then the expectations are shared right across the family, and less chance for any kind of misagreements or anything like that. But succession planning, I can't say enough for that. If you, the BDC, I'm sure has, a lot of information you could tap into. And, how do you do succession planning? You can sell stock to the family members. You could create a living trust. There's a lot of tax implications. So when you're going to do that, you do it with a lawyer who's done that before, and you do that with a tax accountant who's done, that kind of business before as well. So those are the key things that you need to understand. Okay, so you need a clear exit plan. Are you going to sell the company or close the business or pass it on? And how do you do that? Okay, so now we're talking about entrepreneurship. This is just a discipline on the route on what you can take. Won't be a test question. I got that in there just for for information. But here's the kind of things that you should know, though, is that if you're going to take a look at starting a business, you should know what it would cost to acquire customers. And how to do that, how to calculate a CAC, is that what would it cost to sell to them? What would it cost to market to them? And then you divide those costs over the new customers that you acquire. And again, once you get this number, you take a look and you benchmark against similar businesses at similar life cycle positions, in your industry, and you say, oh, here, my costs a lot higher, to acquire new customers than, business B down the street. And then you start thinking about, what is it that you need to do to be able to do that. So if you take a look at, the market itself, you can see that TAM, that's how big the business is. So this is for your business in your footprint area is this large, all right? But you normally can't get all the total available markets, right? So what you do then is that, see, how many can I reach? And that's your SAM, all right? And then in how many I can reach, well, how many will be in my target market in terms of my, set of ideal customers, or my just one ideal customer that I'm looking for, right? So you should understand what these terms are: the TAM, the SAM, and and the target market. Okay. So here's another thing that you do is that, when you start a business, and sometimes you're an entrepreneur and you're building the better mousetrap. No one's ever done it before. And so what you do then is you need to put this thing together and then do a proof of concept on it. Does it work? All right. Okay, yeah, it works. Okay, but how can I translate that into a product or a service, that I could sell, right? And so you create a prototype, all right? And then when you create that prototype, well, then what you do is you take a look at the minimum viable product. And normally what the minimum viable product is, it's kind of like the bare bones piece, and it has just the amount of features and benefits that would attract a buyer, and it's just sufficiently enough to attract what we call early adopters, the people that are looking for the next best thing, and then it's got to be tangible. Even that if it's a piece of software, you need to let them try it, say for free for 90 days, to be able to test how much value it can bring to your business. All right. So you should understand what a minimum viable product is. Okay. So here's where I'll introduce you to two concepts. Don't have to know this, but I think it really kind of puts it in perspective. So what a minimum viable product is in this concept. The good, better, best marketing strategy has been around, I bet you, 50 years. Okay. And what it is that the good product is basically the minimum viable product, right? And then what you do then is that, you can introduce maybe different prices around that, for a better product. And you can concentrate more on value. You could add a few more features or whatever. And then the best, this is, the best that you can offer in terms of its premium quality. It's got all the bells and whistles and all those pieces. And what marketers have found is that if you offer these three levels, chances are, the people that are looking just for the minimum viable product, and again, this better and best comes after this, all right? Here's where you start business, but then that's what you strive for. So if they're looking at this, then they say, oh, you know what? There's a lot more value here for not so much more money, and I want to do that. And chances are, if you introduce best, you will get a higher set of revenue providers because they're looking for value, and also they will actually, and some of them will go to your better product as well. So it's a way of really enhancing your entire market going through. Now, when we talked about early adopters, okay, and we say here, sufficient enough to early adopters. Here's a guy, Jeffrey Moore, that you should read this book if you're going to get into marketing. And here's where these early adopters are, in terms of this. So what it is that you want, if you're just attracting what he calls innovators, they're not regarded in business as players, right? But if you have this next portion, and this is a distribution, right? And a distribution line. This is 13.5% of the buyers are early adopters, but they're credible. And if you want to sell your new product, to an early majority, say like General Motors, well, then you use these early adopters to actually refer and promote and add validation to your product, and that's how you can take on more of the market, you see, and that's why this kind of goes along with the good, better, best, because by the time you get to the late majority, you can be really enhancing your whole business. So this is a fascinating book to read. It still applies today, especially in terms of technology products. Okay, not going to talk about that. Timon's model of entrepreneurship process. I'm not going to talk about that too much. Here's my hero again. I strongly recommend that you read this. And here's just a little bit about Michael Gerber and Gerber. I'm sorry. And here's what the piece is. This kind of explains why businesses fail. Normally, you get into a business because you're good at something. So let's say you're the technician, and you make a particular product, and you're the best at doing it, and that's what gets you in there. And you're living in the present, and you like to get into your work and the nuts and bolts. But at some point in time, your business gets a little bigger, and it gets bigger than you. So you need to hire people. So you start hiring people, and then you have to spend some of your time managing these people, all right? And the thing is that you need to start creating structure and start looking at problems, because you've got other people that are coming together, and you got to take a look at how's this business going to maintain itself. But then you get to a larger size and you want to expand even more. Then you have to start looking at, where do I really want to take this business? Gerber talks about, calls this entrepreneur, I call this the visionary part, where you take a look at what's driving that. So here's how businesses fail. So you get this large business, you're up to here now where you've expanded that business to the point where you've got a vision, and then you start running into problems. And because you, the technician, that's what you knew how to do, things start not working for you, and you just kind of isolate yourself and spend more time, as a technician, and so that this, turns into 70% and 20% and 10%. And what he's saying is that you have to work on the business as much as you do in the business to be able to be sustainable. I mean, that's the whole crux of this piece. Okay. I'm not going to talk about that. All right. So don't lose sight as a technician owning the business, and what you should do when you're building that, and this comes from, I guess, the Heath brothers as well, is that when you're building your business, always look at, how, at the end of my business cycle, how am I going to create value so I can sell this business? And the best thing that you can do is build this business as if you were building a franchise, which means that you can leave, anytime, and the work will still go on. And because most business owners, once they leave the business is no good to the buyer. They need the owner to make it work. Whereas if you treat it like a franchise and you build in process, then the processes will self-sustain, and you won't need the owner to run the business, and it'll be of more value to the new business owner, because it's it's a turnkey thing, and they could be making money the first day that they own it, right? So that's key. Okay. Albert Shapiro is another one of the people that we that are in the 1A pieces to understand what's going on. And I think that's it. Yeah. Okay. So let me just comment on the last few slides here. Yeah, I think that's all I'm going to talk about. There's nothing highlighted here. You might want to take a look at the 5 personas of entrepreneurs, because there's different types of entrepreneurs, and you could be a different type and understand that, hey, I can make this work, and that's about it. So that's it. By tomorrow, I hope to have another video out on helping you get through assignment number 2. Just if you have any questions right now, you can unmute, or just put a question in the chat if you like. And then if you have any other questions, you can email me. And like I said, I'll answer your question directly, and then I will put the answer in announcements as well if I know it can help your colleagues. Okay. Thanks for being on the webinar, and we'll catch you next week. And mind that the assignment number 2 is due May the 13th, and your learning team charter is due tonight, at 11:59, I think, and we'll go from there. Okay. If you have any questions, then just keep the emails coming in. Okay. And that's it.